What's up, guys? This is Matt with Colorado Spirits Collective. We're finally here at 291 to get Michael Myers and Eric Jett here to do a video. Thank you guys for getting me in on your one day in town on your busy traveling season. So, yeah, cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Glad you're here.
Appreciate everything. So, one of the reasons I wanted to come to 291 is obviously they're Colorado, but they, to me, are one of the most unique and Colorado, from like with the aspen staves to where you guys source some of your ingredients, to even like we were talking about earlier, like where you manufacture some of your distill or stripping still,
right,
and that kind of thing. So, and that's one of the most unique tasting whiskeys I personally have ever had, and I've had a lot of whiskey. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to say, ingredients. We are grain to barrel to bottle. Have been from the start. Your word sourcing can be a sore spot. But you're talking, where do we get our grain, our barrels, things like that.
Sourcing of ingredients.
Yes.
Not sourcing of
whiskey.
anything else. Yes, for sure.
So very proud of that.
Yes, absolutely. You want to start off with, you were obviously a photographer prior to building all this.
Yeah. So yeah, I was a fashion beauty photographer in New York. Shot Angelina Jolie when she was 15, 16. The Olsen twins were some of my last clients. 9/11 changed my life. Ended up moving to Colorado and then back to New York and then Colorado, and was commuting, doing photography and looking for something else that I could do just so I was close to home more and stuff like that. August 2010, I was shooting Vanity Fair, and on the flight back read an article about Stephen Goss, who created Hendrick's Gin and Sailor Jerry, and thought I could brand a whiskey, and then someone said, why don't you try and make it? And I'm like, I'm from Georgia, they make it in the woods, how hard can it be? And here I am.
Yep.
I mean, I can tell you more about the story if you want more detail. And
I know, like, one of the cool things is 291, like where that comes from, like kept coming up like in your life, and that was kind of your inspiration.
Yeah. So 291 comes from the very first photo gallery ever in the world. Gallery 291 was in 291 Fifth Avenue, New York, 1907. Alfred Stieglitz started it. He was a photographer. He wanted to show just photographs. Prior to that, they showed photographs and paintings in salons. So he decided to do a gallery, and it was around for 1907 to 1912 or 17, I forget. You can look it up. That's how I remember it. I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and my dorm room when I moved in was 291. And then I learned about the gallery, and I was like, oh, I'm meant to be a photographer. And kept the key. I have the key to this day. And then built the distillery, built my finish still, my original finish still from photogravure plates, and the process of distillation reminds me of the dark room. So that's why it's 291.
Yeah, it's very like how you, like your story incorporates into like the brand that you've built, and like not just like fashion photographer to whiskey maker kind of thing. It's like it all comes, I guess, full circle within your story, and it's like one of the coolest ones I think out there.
Yeah, it does. You know, as a photographer in the fashion world, understanding brands, how brands are built, I think I really took my knowledge of all that and realized that the story had to be there. And the story was there. It wasn't, you know, it's not fabricated. I definitely think about what I do and make sure that it's done from the heart. And usually a story is based there because of that. So, yeah.
You're good.
Come on.
It's all live.
It'll get edited.
Cut it out.
Fancy stuff. There we go. I don't think I've ever had this.
That's got bubbles.
That's right.
It's fancy. It just has bubbles.
And then, so you had started with your 50-gallon still, right?
45 gallons.
45 gallons still. And then you were in 300 square feet.
I was. So yeah, 300 square feet. We started with a 55-gallon mash tun corn cooker that I built out of a Bleakman tank. And then I had a 55-gallon stainless drum that I put a coil in it, a steam coil, and built a stripping still with that. It also did double duty for corn cooker as well. And then I had plastic Pepsi, food grade,
Like 55-gallon drums, but
plastic ones. Yeah. That I cut the top off, and those were fermentation tanks. And then the 45-gallon stripping still with the, I think originally it was a 5-gallon barrel was the front keg for it, and then it went to a 10-gallon barrel. That I had a manifold built for that the swan's neck would come over and connect to that front keg manifold, and then it would go down and come back out and put a condenser.
So you're the Eric Jett, you're the head distiller.
I am here. Yes.
You guys had met prior to.
We met 10 years ago now, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had just started working at another distillery, and Michael had just started his own distillery, and so we had just both recently started distilling, and at an industry event, he brought the first industry event you went to. Yeah, it was actually held at the distillery I was working at, and I was working the shift, but I took a break, went over to see all the other distilleries and what they brought, and we were reporting to people, and Michael brought his white whiskey, fresh off the still. And I think you got a plug in there.
It's that time of year.
It's that time of year. You got to fly in a drink.
That sounds a little chilly. So there's something inside.
Well, yeah, but it's a fruit fly. It's that time of year for fruit flies.
Yeah. So Michael brought his white whiskey, and I went over and I tried it, and it was the best. And to this day, it's still the best white whiskey I've ever had. And so I was talking about, wow, it's so flavorful. You got these notes and these notes, and Michael and I just connected and bonded over that. We saw each other again a few months later at another event up in Breckenridge. And I think from there it was just kind of one of those things where when Michael tells him he knew he wanted to hire me from the jump, he's like, I want to hire that guy. And I told him, I was like, coach me whatever, just as soon as you're ready, let me know. And at some point eventually I was ready, and he had built up the company for almost 3 years on his own and needed to start doing other things besides mashing and distilling, and needed someone to take over production so he could do all the other stuff he was doing, and brought me on, and I was over almost 7.5.
Yeah.
No, it'll be 8 years in January. So, yeah.
So, just clear, I didn't poach him.
No. I had left.
He had left. He let me know that he had left.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I was worried that he was going to get another job. Getting him. So I had a new CFO that helped me figure it out and bring him on. So,
Do you remember I almost did get a job at another distillery at the same time?
oh, I do. I think they do know that.
That's a story for another time.
So, funny thing, since we're talking about bugs in our whiskey, fruit flies. Male fruit flies, especially, drown themselves in alcohol when they don't find a mate.
It's their preferred way to die. They can't find a mate is to find alcohol and drown in it. So
they won't go to water, they'll go to alcohol.
Yeah.
What other way than do they do?
I'm drowning some sorrows today. So.
And then, which that kind of transitions into our next question. Your team is what you kind of, obviously you started the brand, but your team is what has helped you get to
Where we
this
are
point and where you guys are today. You know, talk about like just a little bit of your team and like how.
So I have an amazing team. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 people. There's some, from my photography career, there's some freelancers, meaning part-time people. That
We
work
got
here
part-time
and
sales reps in the
sales reps and
States.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a photographer, especially in the fashion world, you have to build a team per shoot. You know, sometimes those are the same people. Sometimes they're people you've worked very little with. Sometimes, as you grow, it's usually the same teams. And even if you need to switch somebody else in or out, you've worked with them a lot as well. So it helps you understand dynamics of people and things like that. And I really think that's what helped me build a really great team. You know, and Emily, who just handed me water, sold more whiskey before she worked for me than anybody because she stood in my tasting room and poached people going to the restaurant next door and said, "You should try this whiskey," and then they would buy bottles. And Philip Raleigh was the bartender at the time. He's my VP of business development now. He's sold most of the whiskey that's been sold out of this distillery, except for the retail side of it. He's been with me almost 8 years as well. The COO, Murray Aronson, has been with me for about the same amount of time. And then Zach, who's production back here in Micah. Zach got married in our last distillery. He was hanging out at the tasting room.
He got engaged there and got married at our last distillery.
So yeah, and it's amazing because they came to me more than anything and found Salt 291 out, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that goes to show, like, too, what you guys, what you started, and you guys have built, like, people are coming to you, like, and they want to work for and be a part of, like, the brand itself.
yeah, the family, the
Right.
community.
And not only, like, to me, like, that's why I love whiskey and bourbon in the first place, but, like, specifically Colorado, like, you guys, like, that's why I focus on Colorado brands and wanted to get you guys in.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's definitely.
We're a 10-year-old company now. When you have companies, distilleries out there that are 100 plus years old, like in the grand scheme of things, we're a startup. You know, at any startup company, like you gotta really want it. You know, you gotta love making whiskey. It's hard work, and you know, I used to sleep on Michael's couch when I first started with him. Get a text this morning about, you know, while I'm still in bed, about the drains clogging up here. So stuff like that, like day in, day out, there's always challenges. We're aggressively trying to grow right now. And so that always makes each new year, you got bigger and bigger goals. And it's always a challenge to hit those goals. And so we haven't even hit our full stride yet. We're still aggressively growing. So you gotta really want it to work at this.
Yeah. And I feel like too, like Colorado as a whole, like within the last 20 years, like the whiskey industry has taken off, and like you guys are more on like the founding side, if you will, of like the 20 years or so.
We are.
Comparing it to Kentucky, which to me, you can't compare a Kentucky bourbon with Colorado bourbon. It's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And different in a lot of ways. You know, different in the amount of whiskey that's been made over time, and also, you know, us being new in that world of whiskey, but to wanting to make a whiskey that's Colorado and not Kentucky bourbon. I mean, we could easily have gone to Kentucky and sourced the same yeast and got some experts to help us make a very Kentucky whiskey in Colorado. And I love Kentucky whiskey. I love bourbon. I love Tennessee whiskey. But I wanted Colorado to be different for me. And so I really set out to make my whiskey, my Colorado whiskey. And Eric helps me every day with all that.
You guys are.
And my guys help me every day with all that too. Like it's all the way down, man.
Sure.
Everybody can't do it without anybody on the team here.
And like I said, you guys are a very unique taste. Like there's no comparison.
Yeah,
for sure.
And you know what's interesting about it? A lot of people attribute it just to the aspen. We use aspen staves that we toast ourselves, put in the barrel, and because we put that on the bottle, legally we have to. We also want to showcase, hey, we use this local Colorado ingredient. There's so many other variables that affect the taste of the whiskey. Our whiskey tastes like 291 even before the aspen. That's just one of many things that makes 291 taste the way it does, from the yeast we use, the way we cook, all those things. That it's Colorado more than just because we took some whiskey.
Yeah, and to speak on that it's funny because there's some, you see people tasting the whiskey and that haven't been to the distillery and they're like, oh my God, that must be the whiskey or the aspen coming through. I can really taste that aspen. What we know is that flavor change or profile change is very slight. It's not. It's very subtle. It's not that big difference. That's not what makes our whiskey different. It's a group of things. You spoke to it. It's the equipment that we build. It's me starting in that 300 square foot space and building stills and then mimicking those stills to larger stills.
We found out the hard way that as you're scaling up, when you're scaling, if you change the column size and shape even a little bit, you're getting closer to that fly.
I know. I don't want to throw out good whiskey, but it looks like I'm having a little protein with it.
But like we learned that even as you're building, if you change the column shape just a little bit, it changes the taste of the spirit coming off. So we're trying to stay as faithful as we possibly can as we're growing to Michael's original recipe, because even something as subtle as the geometry of the column design will affect the taste of the spirit coming off the still.
Yeah, forever. When I was starting out, things I read and talked to people, they talked about, Scotch distilleries long ago, if there was a dent, if something happened to hit the still and dented it, when they made a new still to add production or whatever, they would mimic the dents. And I always thought that was a joke. Not a joke, just lore. Part of the story. It's not part of the story. We know that really well. It changes the flavor, not drastically, again, subtle, but it changes the flavor.
For sure.
You learn quick.
And then we kind of talked about it too, like with ingredients earlier. Like you started with the same stuff that you're using today, and then you got like the root shoot corn and all that.
You're representing root shoot.
Root shoot's amazing. They've done some great stuff for us. But when I started, nobody was malting rye in Colorado, so I had to go with a bigger company, German rye malt. I also used some North American rye malt, and we've learned there's a flavor difference. Can be a large flavor difference in the rye malt, from company to company. And so you just have to be, you don't want to change your flavor overnight, or you mimic the notes of your whiskeys.
And that's like people who were drinking your stuff 10 years ago would obviously like, why'd they change it? Like, kind of thing. One of the cool and unique things I love about 291 are the bottles. So you guys do like a stamped process kind of thing, or heat
so it's called letterpress, and so it's another copper plate process. So it's a heated copper plate that stamps a foil onto the label, you know, and puts the gold and silver. There's no ink in the process of the label. It's just foil stamped, letter pressed is what it's called. It's a great process. It started, so I've been doing it since I started this. When I was a photographer, I learned about letterpress maybe at Savannah College of Art and Design, but went to New York and learned even more about it, and had my cards all letterpressed, and so it's something I've always loved. And when it came to making a label, I was like, okay, how do I find, you know, I want it letterpressed. So I searched like the web, and a local person came up, and I mean local, because he did it in his garage. He had 2 machines and a little shed more than a garage, but he's been stamping my labels, not from day one. There were a couple that were just Xeroxed, but shortly after that. And now he does it in-house. We brought one of the machines in, and he stamps them all in-house now. I'm excited about that.
Did you get any pictures of that?
Oh yeah,
When we showed you around? Okay.
Yeah, I got like a little video of
That
it.
particular press that he told us was made in the 1950s. The technology's around since early 1800s or earlier, maybe. But that particular press was made in the 1950s that he works on. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. And that was another timing kind of thing with like the history of you guys was he was looking to kind of semi-retire, and then you guys brought him semi-retired and then probably out of retirement now.
Yeah, no, he's still semi-retired. He travels and prints labels when he needs to, and has a lot of, it's an awesome partnership.
Yeah. And then one thing that is also different about you guys is you use the champagne cork cage. Or cage.
Cork.
Yeah.
So the cork is just natural cork. It's actually a cork that I designed. When I started, I was using more or less science lab type corks that are just kind of shaped like that, tapered corks, and they would only seal on one spot. They didn't seal all the way down because they weren't straight. So I drew up a design where the shaft was longer, and then it had the taperedness to it, and so that's where that cork came from. And then the cage. The cage is a funny story. When I started this, I was like making high-proof whiskey, and when I was really young, I thought it was a Western movie, but it's an episode on Little House on the Prairie.
We hunted it down.
Yeah, someone did for me, and a friend, and only a couple of years ago, and it's the longest day or a long hard day or something, and they're transporting nitroglycerin in a wagon, and they've wired it in so it doesn't jolt and blow up because it's nitroglycerin. And so making high-proof whiskey, got to wire it in, and that's where that cage idea came from. It was interesting. My friend Sam Elliott pointed it out. My mom's a huge champagne drinker and big influence in my life, and when he first saw the cage, he thought that's where it came from, was the influence from my mom. And not to say that didn't help influence me, but my original thought was high-proof whiskey being wired in.
And then, so we have.
They're a pain to put on, by the way.
I know. I always, whenever I open my bottle at my bar, I always put it back on.
Oh, do you?
And screw it back
Nice.
together. I gotta keep it.
I agree.
Traditional, so this is the 291 barrel proof single barrel Colorado whiskey. 129 proof.
Yeah.
Go through that and kind of talk about.
So yeah, that's my that's the whiskey I set out to make. When I started this, I liked rye a lot. I like bourbon, but I really like the spiciness of the rye. and I really wanted to set out and make a really phenomenal whiskey, a rye. So this actually was my second recipe. My first came about, which is the bourbon, came about because Mike Bristol Brewing Company, that was helping me a little bit, gave me a 50-pound bag of corn. I mashed in over a weekend with some rye malt, and that was my original recipe. That is my bourbon recipe to this day, with a little 1% of malt barley added to it. But my second recipe was 61% malt rye, 39% corn, and that is my whiskey. And I wanted a Western whiskey that was big, bold, and beautiful like the state of Colorado. The other words are rugged, refined, rebellious, like I am. And I believe this whiskey is very much that. It's a friend of mine, Nate Wingman, said it's an unapologetic rye whiskey, and it is. It's the high corn content, the malt adds a lot of sweetness to it, which is really great for the spice level that comes out. And that was the white dog that Jett just died over.
Yeah, it was the white dog of the rye recipe. Yeah, and so for that one, you'll notice in the label it actually doesn't say rye. We just call it our Colorado whiskey with its single barrel proof iteration, because that's the flagship. That's what Michael really wanted to make, was this high proof rye whiskey, and he wanted to kind of put that on the map, and he sees that as his main contribution, initial contribution to Colorado whiskey. It is a rye whiskey, it doesn't say it on there, it's just Colorado whiskey, but our small batch rye will say rye on it. But yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I was a stickler about that, because we got feedback that they wanted rye on the label, because there's a big trend about rye whiskeys and all like that. And I was like, that's fine on a small batch, but this is my whiskey and it's going to stay Colorado. And there's a little but there's a little whiskey confusion with that. But once people know it, they know it. I'm not changing.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact.
Oh yeah, love it. And then next is we got the high rye, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah, this one was a mistake. This came about from, this is like the first month I was working with my first week maybe. It was the first bourbon mash we did.
Right.
So it was the first bourbon mash I did with Michael, and I was asking him the recipe, and he was off doing other stuff, and I'm like, what's your recipe for your bourbon? At the time we were doing 2 mashes in a day, and that would fill 1 fermenter, and he gave me the numbers for the mash, or I think I specifically asked how much rye. That's what it was. I asked how much rye. He gave me the numbers. I go mash in, and at the end of the day, I'm looking at everything like, that just doesn't seem right. That seems like way more rye than he told me to add, And so I go back to him and I say, this is how much rye I added. He said,
the numbers didn't match.
Yeah, he was like, you added that to each mash? I was like, yeah. He's like, that was supposed to be for the whole ferment, for both mashes. So I basically ended up doubling the rye content on accident. It was just cross-wire miscommunication. And we're like, well, it's already mashed, we're going to ferment it, we'll see what happens. And, put it in the barrel, and we harvested that barrel, those barrels. It was great. We loved it. And so it kind of was this thing every other year we would make it. And now we're starting to make it every year consistently. And at first it was a single barrel release only, and now we started batching it, like with our other special releases. But I like it just because of the memories, but it really is. It's one of my favorite bourbons that we release. So I like bourbon.
It's probably the most balanced bourbon we release. And it was a total mistake. Funny, but it came off the still. The white dog was really good, and then once we barreled it, it came off. And it was like, all right, that's what we're doing. So yeah, and it kind of floundered around, not because of the taste of the whiskey. I mean, the whiskey's amazing, but we priced it, we proofed it down to bottle proof, and we priced it in between our bottle proof and our barrel proof, and it just kind of floated in a weird spot, and we kind of finally rebranded it in the sense of, okay, it's coming out at barrel proof, we're batching it, and we're going to release it every year.
I will say, like, for me, I think it's the underdog of our special releases, We've got our E, which we're not talking, we don't have one up here right now, but people get excited about the E because each batch is different. But with that, you don't always know what you're going to get. We've had E's win huge awards like World's Best Wheat, one of our previous E's. But then you have other ones that they're good, but they're so different from one to the other. Bad Guy's great. People love Bad Guy. M actually took off immediately. We're about to come out with another 2 batches of M actually here really soon. But High Rye, our High Rye bourbon, for whatever reason, I feel like it's actually kind of the unsung underdog hero of our special releases because it is such a solid year after year. I think the release of a bourbon that's a little almost between our rye and our bourbon.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. Something he said, I was
For anybody out there that wants to get our other special releases and you never thought about High Rye and you see it on the shelf, pick it up.
Oh, yeah.
Like I love it.
Yeah, and our E's are totally different. I mean, some are single malt, and some of them are bourbon, some of them are rye. So they're totally different. Not to say that from batch to batch, High Rye or Bad Guy isn't different. Year to year, every is different, but it's consistently the same mash bill. It's just barrels and things like that change the notes of the whiskey. So,
and kind of like we were talking about, like that to me, High Rye is like out of your entire special releases and everything, 15 different whiskeys or so.
I think there are 14 different whiskeys that we release, plus our liqueur.
Yeah. 12 SKUs. And then if you add the E's in there, it gets bigger.
So like out of all of those, like consistently High Rye is like definitely my favorite. That's delicious for sure. And then I think we got
The X is
the
in the middle.
X. So this is single barrel from this barrel.
If you're watching this, it's already too late.
It's sold out.
If you didn't get a bottle, this was a really, really limited release for our 10-year anniversary. 158 bottles out of this barrel right here that the bottles are sitting on. Aged 7 years. It was our first 53-gallon barrel we filled. We filled it together.
Our first and only.
First and only so far that we've released, we released for our 10-year. It was also the 150th anniversary of Colorado Springs, where we're located right now. We've won 150 plus awards now at this point. Just a lot of milestones, and to release a 7-year-old whiskey. As it aged here in this dry climate, it got up to 148.7.
Well, it came
148.7.
It came out of the barrel at 149.7.
No, 149.1.
Okay.
Something like that. Anyway, we don't have it written down. But we had to, put aspen staves on it, let it kind of
sit for a little bit, so it proofed down with single proof. But Eric's talking about all the numbers. That's what numbers down here are 7, 10, 53, 150, and 150, and those all relate to what he said. 7 years in a 53-gallon barrel. The 10th anniversary of 291, the 150th anniversary of Colorado Springs, and 150 awards at the time that we bottled. We've won more awards in the last 2 weeks since we bought, 3 weeks since we bottled.
So we were just in the back room over there, and Emily was opening.
We got some medals in the mail from San Francisco. we got another double gold medal from San Francisco just today came in the mail. But yeah, it was it's a fun whiskey. It's crazy. It is rugged. It's bold. But what's fun about it is that was made on all the old equipment, the old fermenters, the older stills, and the old location 7 years ago. So it's a little different than what we're releasing now, but not wildly so. I'm excited to continue aging our whiskey longer and see what whiskey that we'll make it now taste like 7 years from now.
But also on top of that, it's even cooked differently. So all our whiskey. When I started, we cook up, so we heat water, add grain, heat, add more grain, and go up to a boil. I had taken a class with Dave Pickrell up in Breckenridge, and he talked about Maker's Mark cooking down, so bringing water up to almost a boil, and then adding grain and cooling down. And so I took the rye recipe, 61% malt rye, 39% corn, and cooked down. And that's another, I don't know if it's a milestone, but another marker is that it was my last mash in, where I physically stirred it and mashed in, poured the grain in, because Eric was around at that time. And then Eric and I filled it.
You know, remember what we called it for the longest time? DP Cow. Well, Colorado whiskey, but the DP stood for Dave Pickerel, and God rest his soul. Yeah. But like that, you know, it was, Michael got a chance to learn a lot from him, not just at that class, but over the years after that. And so we were excited, actually kind of bummed we wasn't able to taste it since he kind of inspired that little tweak that we made with it.
But it added such a different note to my whiskey that was amazing. And we didn't keep mashing or cooking down mainly because of equipment. It was really tough to do it to cool. Now we're at the capability of where we can maybe start cooking
experimenting again, doing all kinds of fun things.
Yeah.
Cool. And then next on the lineup we have the M, which was apparently a big hit for my Instagram followers.
Yeah.
That was the most mentioned. But
so the M came about because we have a lot of barrels that we have to do something with once we harvest whiskey out of them. There are a lot of breweries and personal people that buy them and stuff like that, but we have a lot coming out.
So we ended up selling a lot up to Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin. Maple syrup. I couldn't remember maple.
Maple.
I was like,
what's the M
where am
stand
I? Maple syrup, and he tried one barrel or something, and then was like, oh my God, this is amazing, and started buying all our barrels. And
Lincoln County Reserve, Wisconsin, make great maple syrup.
Yeah, and he said last year, what if I send you some barrels back and you put whiskey back in them? And Eric's like, okay. And I'm like, okay.
Was that his idea? If it was Dean's idea, man, that's awesome.
I think
all I know is you don't really like flip. It doesn't excite you to do barrel finished whiskeys too much, right? Because a lot of other distilleries do it, and they do it really well. It doesn't excite you that much. You have to find the right thing.
Yeah, I'm not looking. He knows this.
Yeah.
I'm not looking to do
like a
port
finish,
wine
exactly.
finish or
because other people do it.
because other people do it. Right. And so we've done some finishes. And
one other one before this. E-Batch 6. E-Batch 6 was it? Oh, I got them all up here. E-Batch 6 we finished in cherry and peach wine barrels, which previously were our barrels that they then aged cherry and peach wine in. We got them back. And then this with the maple syrup.
That was amazing.
Great. I love that whiskey. And then this one, we get a few barrels back every year. We're always up in that. This year we're going to release more M than we did last year. We're getting back from Wisconsin that had maple syrup in them, that previously had our whiskey in them, aging our whiskey again and finishing our whiskey. Aging. And what's cool about the two finishes now that we've done, they originally started out as our barrels that someone else used for something else that we got them back. So that's pretty cool. And it's a thick whiskey. It's a very mouth-coating viscosity, very sweet, yet that spice of the rye is still there. Oh, it's great.
What's awesome about that as well is the proof. Last year was 123.4.
Yeah.
Which was funny. They just came out that way. That was not planned. The Ilm label, I don't know. I just call it Ilm. I don't think about Michael. It was labeled Ilm because of the maple. I only say that because, like the E, there's people
that
around
stands
us.
for Eric.
Yeah, people claim the E all the time. I've never claimed Ilm as my label. I mean, this is my whiskey, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and Eric was like really excited about it. I wasn't at first, right?
Yeah.
And thought it would be an E, and I was like, yeah, maybe. And then
Yeah, you weren't even sure if we would release it as an E. I was like, it'll at least be an E. And then we tasted like, this is its own thing.
This is its own label.
Yeah.
And so the M, the last label like that was High Rise. So M was the next one. And then, So the next is Bad Guy on that list. And Bad Guy is amazing. 4-grain wheated bourbon. It literally is my third recipe. In that 300 square foot space where I can make 60 gallons a month. In 2012, after making my rye, put it in barrels. Jim Murray gave my rye barrel number 2 94 points. His highest score is 97.5 points, so that was amazing. Bad Guy Barrel 1 came out a year later, 2013, and he gave it 95.5 points. Which is pretty amazing to be in a 300 square foot space, legal, DSB, and getting Jim Murray liquid golds like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Bad Guy is a great whiskey. It's a really pretty whiskey.
I got to try the release that's about to come out.
Oh yeah.
I'm actually currently drinking this year's release that's not out yet, and I will say I like it better than last year's for anybody who's interested.
And so both all three of those, High Rye, Bad Guy, and M are coming out. Bad Guy, I believe, is the first one. It comes out in October. High Rye comes out in November, right?
Yep.
And then M, late November, I think. We've talked
High
about
Rye is early November. M, I don't know when this releases, but M will be probably the week of or before Thanksgiving. So 2 November releases.
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So
I'll say this will release this. This will drop this week, so.
Oh,
okay.
There you go. It'll be good. But, so, of course,
I think that's the first time we announced all those releases then. Anybody watching this will probably hear of the release times before anybody else.
Yep. There's your tease.
Yeah, right? And then, so people want to know, like, out of your whole lineup, which one's your favorite?
Colorado, that one.
Yeah.
That whiskey is, I love them all. I mean,
Right.
who's your favorite kid, right? You love them for different reasons. You hate them for other reasons. You never hate your kids. But I have 2 boys that I love that are amazing. They're very different, both of them, and they're incredible. But yeah, my whiskeys, I mean, I can sit here and drink them all and shift around, but I really set out to make the Colorado whiskey. That's why it's called Colorado whiskey. I'm very proud of it. Yeah. So, it makes a great black Manhattan. That barrel proof Averna, Amaro, a little bit of bitters. It's phenomenal cherry, maraschino cherry. So,
Yeah. What about you?
It depends on the season. It's definitely some barrel proof, whether it's our Colorado or our barrel proof bourbon. Sometimes I find that I want more bourbon in the spring and the summer, and the rye in the fall and the winter, but it really just depends on the day and the mood I'm in. Those are my go-tos of the special releases, unless we have an amazing E, which we've had some E's that are up there in my top 5 favorite whiskeys we've ever released. Usually it's High Rye, although, man, this year's Bad Guy is up there. I don't know, I have a hard time picking.
yeah,
They're all like Michael, like he says, like his kids, they're kind of the same thing. It just depends on the mood I'm in. I love, and there's something we're not talking about here, are our small batches. We're actually drinking those because I think we forget about it because they're our daily drinkers. You know, it's our small batch whiskey. It's stuff that I drink on the regular all the time. And it's not special in the sense that it's a limited release, but it is. It's special. It's a special. It's still unique. Everything you were talking about it being some of the most unique whiskey you've tasted before, that's still true of our small batches as well. Those are just, we'll take 20 to 22 barrels, make a batch out of them, proof them down to either 100 proof for our bourbon or 101.7 for our rye. It's a little lower proof. And the reason why, if I'm looking for something really special, I don't go for those, is because I've fried my palate from drinking whiskey, barrel proof whiskey for years and years and years. But like, I just love barrel proof whiskey. Yeah. But if you enjoy a good 100 proof or a 101.7 proof whiskey, which we all do, definitely, The small batch, those are great too.
Yeah.
I drink those all the time.
You can't go wrong with any.
Yeah.
There are session whiskeys.
Yeah, it's true.
There are session whiskeys because if you dive in deep in barrel proof,
Oh, yeah.
you ain't coming out. But the small batches are you know, and I'm in Eric's boat as well. Is there's days where I won't rye, there's days I won't bourbon, you know, and I go back with the small batch because you can have a few glasses and not be lit, you know,
Right.
and really enjoy it. But there are days where I'm drinking rye and I'm like, I'm just not feeling it, and I'll start drinking the bourbon. And then special releases. I mean, I have all the special releases on my desk. They used to be in a special cabinet. We've got to work that cabinet out. But
Not my job.
well, Murray's giving me grief about them on my desk. So, but I go and pick one up every once in a while and have a drink before I leave. Maybe not. But
We just have to pace ourselves in the special releases, just like you guys, because they come out once a year.
Yeah.
So we can't drink them all year round.
yeah,
unless
we don't
unless
have
we're
them.
pacing ourselves.
You have to pace them.
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of hit on it like during introduction, if you want to call it that. You guys are releasing in Georgia this
Oh yeah,
week.
we are.
So Georgia, look out, because Michael will be there. He leaves tomorrow. Where else across, I guess, the world? Because you guys are in.
So yeah,
starting to hit the international.
we're in 18 states, I think, full distribution. If you go online, 291.com, 291coloradowhiskey.com, or Distillery291.com, you can order, and it ships to 35, 39 states, something like that. We just were in Miami last week, launching Miami. Miami's been a little bit there, but Florida. But we big push, did some really nice tastings out there. And then Georgia this week. And then we are in, we've opened Oregon a little more, put some brand ambassadors in these places, so we're getting more whiskey out. Excited about that. We're in Arkansas. We've been there for a year, pushing more whiskey out of there. California, we've been in there for a long time. Just, yeah. So it's in New York,
And Kentucky.
Kentucky.
Wasn't that our first state that we were in outside of Colorado?
No, it was California. Was
Oh, that's
first.
right. Kentucky was the first one, the second, but it was like the first one we did a big shipment to,
Right.
right? I remember.
I mean, Wyoming was the
I was
first
like-
state out of state because
that was
it-
like a liquor store or something.
yeah, because it's a controlled state, and
Right.
somebody could special order a case,
Yeah.
and somebody did.
Yeah.
And then California was kind of first distribution out of state, and then Kentucky.
It was like a big order.
Yeah, they
First
ordered a
big-
pallet.
But I just remember like that was when we first started. Okay, we're branching out.
Yeah.
And being like, man, that's audacious. Really? Like the first big state, like we're really going
Yeah,
hard
Kentucky.
at is Kentucky. It's like, all right, Kentucky, we're declaring war, I guess. Like I love Kentucky. I actually have never been there. But I love
You're
drinking their
going that
whiskey. I
way.
know. I love drinking their whiskey. But like, yeah, I remember thinking, what? That's audacious. Yeah, we're in Kentucky.
I'm
So
definitely
if you're
not
watching this and
afraid.
you're a whiskey fan, no, we're not afraid. And you want something different than your, Kentucky bourbon you're always getting. Try some Colorado whiskey.
Yeah, and if you're there in Louisville and you go to, or anybody, if you go to Justin's House of Bourbon in Louisville, they have it where you can taste it before you ever buy it. And it's amazing that way. I mean, there's tastings throughout the state, but consistently they have it there, downtown Louisville. So.
You kind of touched on it. So you guys have gotten 150 plus awards. So what out of all of those, like, what would you say is your top, like, hell yeah, we got that award kind of thing?
That's a hard question.
Yeah.
Jim Murray's barrel number 2 was the very first award, so that's pretty big. You
Yeah,
know, I mean,
sure.
that was. But the hell yeah was 2018 World's Best Rye Whiskey, where we beat a bunch of people.
Yeah.
You know, So Jim Murray just rates you, and he does name a World Whiskey Award, like world's, I don't know what he, but the
Whiskey of the year.
Whiskey of the Year. But you're still, there's not like second and third place. I mean, I guess there is a little bit. It's just different where World Whiskey Awards, you are like, you win the best, and then there's people under you. And I mean, when I won it, Thomas Handy was under me, and Knob Creek, and some ryes that that are big deals.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a big deal.
I remember that was nuts. You're like, what?
and the other thing is 2016 we won America's Best Rye No Age Statement, but that was the first time presented to those awards, World Whiskey Magazine World Whiskey Awards, because you have to pay to enter, and you also have to give them 3 or 4 bottles, and when you're making 60 gallons a month, Jim Murray asked for 1 bottle or less, and you don't have to pay. So it was like, okay, I can send it to him, and then when I got enough, 2016, I could send to them. And so my point of that is, we could have won maybe earlier, but that was just when I presented. And we, San Francisco double.
Yeah, I was going to say, anytime we get double, we did this year. Anytime literally the medal came in the mail. We knew about it before, but the medal came in the mail today. San Francisco is still one of those ones that's kind of an industry standard that people use. There's a lot of great awards competitions out there, but with the company like San Francisco World Wine and Spirits competition, that's always great. A double gold through that, and there's been a lot of them.
SIP Awards we won.
That's a consumer choice based one.
Innovation award from them, and then platinum, both rye and bourbon, small batch, and but it's consumer based. Consumers award the whiskey. So.
And last year we won World's Best Wheat Whiskey. I guess it was this year.
2021.
2021. We submitted last year. End of last. And 2021's World Best Wheat was awesome. It's not something we make consistently. It's a E. So
68 bottles.
Yeah.
We like that 68. We like that 8.
Yeah.
158, 168.
So that was a special one. That was our second time winning World's Best of anything, right? World's Best Rye, World's Best Wheat. We're gunning for World's Best Bourbon. It's always fun.
Iron Root out of Texas has the handle on that one. They do really well. But the funny thing about the World's Best Wheat is it was batch number 7, which number 7 in the whiskey world is a big deal.
And then you kind of you brought in the teasing a little bit. We got the Bad Guy and
High Rye
coming up in
and
November.
Can we say anything about not anything specific, but that something might be released early next year?
Maybe. I don't know what you're talking about. But
You know exactly what I'm talking
no,
about.
I know we've talked about it, but I don't know what we're talking
something
about.
That we're legally not allowed to say anything more about, but that is coming out possibly early next year.
You're talking a lot more than I talk
I'm
about.
just saying,
There's something. There's a special collaboration.
So basically, for the next 4 months, we've got some special releases coming out in October, a couple in November. I don't think anything in December necessarily, but you could probably find it in December if you're at the right store. Maybe something in January, something really great.
We've got a few specials.
And then we've always got E's aging in barrels. You want to talk? I know one you like to talk about that we just put up in barrels recently. World's first, but first one that nobody knows about.
I guess it's an E. Yeah.
Maybe an E, maybe not an E.
Maybe not.
Something.
It's a rye, 4-grain wheated rye. That I've never heard of 4-grain rye whiskey, let alone wheated. The white dog of it came off the still, and it's screaming good. I mean, the last white dog that came off the still like that was its brother, and that's Bad Guy. Bad Guy's a 4-grain wheated bourbon, and this is the exact same percentage recipe, just the grains mixed up. shifted around. So instead of corn first, it's rye. Wheat is second, like Bad Guy. The third is corn, and the fourth is malt barley. Where the Bad Guy is corn, corn, wheat, rye, barley.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the white dog.
And then we have
great. So we're excited about that. That's going to be a year plus.
Yeah, that's a little ways
That's
out.
a ways out, but you guys know now.
And then we did our bourbon recipe, but switched the rye with wheat.
Yeah.
And so it's 80% corn, 19% malt wheat, and a little malt barley or malt rye.
We might have a couple different wheated bourbon
So
recipes aging right now
yeah,
that we're playing around with. But one of them is definitely better than the other one. I'll say that.
So
Eric, Jett, you're too funny.
So either way.
Eric's been drinking.
Yeah.
I can tell. The other one you talked about, the ED.
Well, that's why I was being real.
I talked kind of.
I didn't break any
No, you didn't.
Okay. We didn't break our contract.
Nobody
We have a
knows.
contract, so we have non-disclosure that we can't talk about.
Gotcha. So, all right. And then where can we find you on social media?
At Distillery 291, or at Distillery 291. Website, distillery291.com, 291coloradowhiskey.com. My personal Instagram is Michael Myers 291. I don't post a lot about whiskey on there. A little bit in my stories, but not. It's personal photographs and stuff like that. He's not on social.
No, he's
Zero.
Nothing wrong with that. And then if you get the chance, you're in Colorado Springs. What's the new address?
4242 North Nevada, Colorado Springs 80907.
Yeah. So it's pretty impressive. It's huge and expanding.
Yes.
Compared to where you guys were.
300 square feet to 7,000, now to 12,000. Next May, 24,000 square feet.
So 291's doing big things. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you,
man.
Thanks for the whiskey as always. And remember, follow us on YouTube, Instagram, usually monthly giveaways, that kind of thing, and then Facebook. So thanks for tuning in.
Cheers.
Cheers.